This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff.
There is a thought, then there's a rocket. There's a manifestation, just try not to block it. These rockets are launching, I'm not sure where they're landing, but those are my desires, that's my understanding. And no, we're not actually going to war. I just like nice things, so I'm asking for more. And these rockets, they're not even explosives, just the way in which Source likes to save on some postage. You won't see these rockets as they fly through the sky. My dreams are invisible to your naked eye. But I feel these rockets as they are propelled, and the joy that they bring me is unparalleled. Life's what we make it with our own ammunition. Just be open to the universe and your inner being's transmission. With our rockets of desires we send off into the sky, we will light up the world like the 4th of July.
Hey, welcome to the show. Today we launch into episode 108 of this podcast, World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment. Now, if you're a regular viewer or listener to the show, you know all about the incredible array of master teachers, experts, mediums, channels, and even ascended masters we bring to you here. Now, if you're new to the show, be prepared to have your mind and heart blown wide open to things you may have never even known were possible, but really do exist. Now, before we head off to meet our guest today, please take a moment to click that subscribe button below so that you never miss a single episode of the show. Also, get a free copy of my ebook, A Simple 3-Step Process to Manifest Positive and Permanent Change in Your Life. Just click that link below in the show notes. All right, we head off now to England to meet our guest today, James Miller. 6 years ago, he was mentally, physically, and spiritually paralyzed with health anxiety. Today, he's free of all of that, but his suffering gave him no choice but to seek answers to life and in finding a solution to his suffering. His life is now an expression of service to others so he can help people find out how to go beyond their perceived limits. I like that one. He now has a program called Frequency Hunter, in which he offers information and knowledge to help you on your spiritual journey. The Frequency Hunter helps to break down the boundaries that prevent you from tuning into the exact frequency you wish to embody. So, James, welcome. Welcome to World Awakenings. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So thank you, man. Wow, I'll tell you what, I've been, doing a little research on you, and yeah. I guess the most obvious place for us to start is finding out how the heck you ended up having this debilitating health anxiety and what events in your life and mind brought you to that place.
Well, the way I could say it started was, so bodybuilding was obviously a massive part of my life, and I was going to the gym every single day. I was a motivated person anyway. My whole life was about motivation. It was about trying to become the best version of myself. And after years and years of doing that, obviously it comes to a point where I was still questioning the nature of myself, but didn't really understand where I was going with it. It was more a case of I was just pushing myself physically, trying to find answers through maybe like achievement and self-progress. But spiritually, I was still kind of stuck in a place where I didn't understand what life was about or where I was going, who I was. And so basically one morning I woke up and the left side of my back was completely numb and I couldn't feel anything. It was completely dead, and automatically like a switch flicked in my head, and it was just instantaneous panic, as if to say, like, something's wrong. Like, I feel like I may be paralyzed. I feel like something, I've maybe damaged my spine from pushing myself too much in the gym or something like that. And obviously what everybody does when they have a little health issue, they Google it. And as you know, with Google will tell you the most horrifying thing you can possibly think of. And right. it was things such as spinal tumors, spinal paresthesia, things like that. And instantly, as soon as I read that, it was just heart palpitations, like into an insane amount of anxiety that I've never experienced in my life previous to this. And from that moment on, it must have been at least 6 months before I really even got out of bed and really faced life again. It was just absolute terror.
Were you actually immobilized by this back pain?
I wouldn't say immobilized. It was more the sense my mind convinced me that I was going to go into be paralyzed and I was on the path to death.
Oh, so wow.
I was convinced that I was dying, and so it would be things such as, like, I could be sit there and I'd be imagining my face on the front page in a newspaper. Young James Miller, 22 years old, has died from such and such. And it'd be just little things that your mind creates, your imagination creates these ideas. Maybe the actual situation isn't actually what it seems, what it appears to be, but my mind was convincing me that it was something completely different to what it actually was. So the fear and the panic was all self-created, which obviously my body responded to that. And my body started to deteriorate and go into a state of kind of disease, you could say, because my mind was convinced of it.
Yeah, and that is so interesting how that, it, like you said, almost a switch had been flipped, and the ego just grabbed that situation with your life and said, "Oh, now I got him where I want him," and then your mind just spiraled. And but I'm curious, did you ever go to a doctor to get an analysis or diagnosis of what was going on with your back?
So the one thing I did do, I went, at the time, I was so petrified that I actually took my mum with me. Also, I'm a 22-year-old man, but I actually took my mum with me because I was in such a state of panic.
Yeah.
And he had a feel around, and I can't really remember too much, to be fair, because my mind was still, even whilst the doctor was examining me, I couldn't really pay attention because my mind was just running loose, and it was convinced of something so, like, it was 100% conviction that no matter what this doctor said to me, it wouldn't change anything. So I think they recommended me to go to a chiropractor or to go to massage therapy. I can't remember too much, but he basically said that he didn't really know what the answer was. So there wasn't actually a definitive answer to what the problem was. He basically just said it could be a trapped nerve, it could be this, it could be that. But in my mind, it was, no, it's a spinal tumor and I'm going to die.
Oh my gosh. You know, with a bodybuilder, I would imagine it could have been a severely pulled back muscle or even a torn back muscle too. Mm-hmm. But you were just fixated on this tumor thing, and I'm gonna die. Wow. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, that is the way the ego works. You know, once it starts thriving, it feeds off of drama and trauma and just keeps your mind in that spiral. So was that the main thing that took you to that place? What happened? How long did this anxiety last for you then?
So I'd say with the intensity that it was probably a period of 6 months, which was led in my bed, and it was just consistent. I didn't want to get out of my room. I didn't want to speak to anybody because the only thing I was fixated on was that. And it came to a point where it was either I commit suicide, which is obviously going to cross your mind, or it was just praying to die in my sleep so that I didn't have to continuously go through this suffering. And at that point, it was, I have to make a decision. Do I look into this, find out the nature of my mind, my reality, and figure a way out of this? Or do I just take my own life? And to me, the option was, I need to find an answer, otherwise I can't continue, which led me then to start reading books. So I started reading Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And that initially was the first time that I understood meditation, and the first time I started practicing, really sitting there and trying to go beyond what my mind was telling me. So the 6-month period was the time when it got most intense, but then that was the point where I really started focusing inwardly and really trying to change. So you could say after 6 months, it was the kind of the process then of processing and breaking down what I had actually gone through for the previous 6 months.
Well, that's really interesting. Now, we could take a 22-year-old, perfectly healthy, super muscular young man, and it shows you the power of the mind, where you just grabbed onto that negative, disempowering place and just spiraled down. At the end of 6 months, before you started to snap out of this, was your whole physical being pretty shot?
It was just essentially the first time I ever contemplated death. So for me, I've never really thought about death. It was kind of something you just put to the back of your mind, because you think, I'm young, like this isn't something I need to think about right now. So it kind of forced me into a position where I had to question the nature of life and death, because I'm looking it dead in the face. Death was literally telling me that you're coming to me, and I have a choice whether I either surrender to it and find out, or I can either resist it and be completely against it. So that was the kind of the process that I was going through in terms of having to come to terms with my death.
Well, and one last question about your back. Did you ever finally figure out what was wrong with it?
It literally, the moment that I started changing the way I thought, gone.
Yeah.
Instantaneously, within moments and moments of really tuning in, it was day by day, the feeling in my back started to come back.
I'm glad you mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza, who healed himself from a broken back that he fell off a bike during a triathlon or something, and the doctor said he was going to be a paraplegic, and now he's a perfectly healthy guy. I just saw a quote from him a few weeks ago, said it's scientifically proven that your mind can heal your body. I don't know if I think I paraphrase that, but
yeah.
So you kind of touched on meditation, but what were some of the first healing modalities that you tried to turn the corner and get back to your excellent health, mentally, physically, and mentally?
So Joe Dispenza talks about how you got neuron pathways, and the more you focus in one direction, you strengthen that neuron pathway in your subconscious. So the first thing that I started doing was I would sit and I would breathe, and I'd get into a completely relaxed state, and I would actually visualize one pathway breaking and beginning a new pathway. And I would consistently imagine myself breaking this pathway and dissolving the pathway, and then using my intention to focus it into another channel of energy. And then as I started to do that, I started to feel that the suffering and the idea of being James that was going to die started to become less, you could say, like, how do I even word it? Very like strong, like there was a strength to it that kind of started to dissolve, and I could feel that my awareness was able to point in the direction and leave that kind of other state behind. But at the time where it was so strong, it took time to obviously allow myself to dissolve that pattern that was existing in my subconscious. So that was kind of the first thing I started with. It wasn't anything in depth. It wasn't anything seriously metaphysical. It was just to the point where I was focused in a different direction to where my mind was used to taking itself. I was now in control, and I was taking hold of the direction of my mind, rather than allowing the mind to take hold of me.
ladies and gentlemen, James Miller is a perfect example of exactly how powerful your mind is, and it can take you to the dark side and losing your body, or it can take you to where he's at now, helping other people. It's like this worst time of your entire life has actually turned out to have a good purpose in teaching you how to help other people. That is amazing. But I would like to talk a little bit more about meditation. I read that you believe that many people have a distorted view of meditation. Well, how so?
Because I think a lot of people are trying to use their mind to remove the mind. And you cannot use your own mind to remove your mind, because it's no different to trying to bite your own teeth. You can't bite and chew your own teeth just the way you cannot remove the mind by using the mind. So they sit there, and the reason they struggle to meditate is because they are trying to use a thought process to try and calm their mind down, when really meditation is about experiencing the awareness that is witnessing the mind and not actually the mind itself, which is where I think people struggle. If you understand that.
Yeah, I do. Did you have a particular teacher or mentor who or form of meditation that worked well for you, that helped you?
I don't believe that meditation can be fitted into any categories or any conclusions, or you can't define meditation in any way, because it's something that steps beyond what you believe yourself to be. So in order to actually meditate, you have to go beyond the self that you believe yourself to be, and the individual sense of identity that you hold, meaning beyond the body, beyond the mind, and witnessing the natural presence that is always there continuously. It can never be destroyed. It can never be, it's something, how do you word? Because this is the thing, you try and word something that isn't actually wordable, because only the mind comes out with words. So a lot of teachers, like you'll see these, like you could say, I don't know if you've heard of Muji, or you've heard of Sri Ramana Maharshi. They're teachers that say that it's the silence is the best teacher, because you try and point to something with words, and really you're just pointing to nothing, because you'll only ever point to more and more words and more concepts, more and more ideas about yourself, and you believe yourself to be a body and an individual identity that's trying to meditate. But really you're none of those things. You are beyond all of it, and meditation is just the absence of mind, and mind is the absence of meditation. So it's not something you can do or practice in a sense with as an individual self. It's something that you have to come to terms with the fact that you are not this idea of individual identity that you hold within yourself, and just continue to observe and observe and observe until eventually the mind just goes into suppression on its own. You don't have to force the mind into suppression. You just, by being the witness and observing the self just reveals itself naturally without any effort on your part.
Well, what you just said, there's a whole lot of spiritual knowledge and concepts in there, that there is more than this, that you are an eternal being. I would imagine that, you described yourself earlier when you were just a budding bodybuilder, that you didn't really have any ideas or thoughts or understanding on spirituality. Did you pick up most of these things from reading or watching particular teachers?
So you could say it started with reading. So at first it was Joe Dispenza, and then because I've never really read a book in my life up until that point. Reading to me was kind of just like this boring thing that, like, it was all about education. It wasn't really something that stimulated me. And then it's from the first time I read Joe Dispenza's book, and I felt for the first time that there is a path out of my own suffering, it became almost an addiction. It became to the point where I became obsessed with understanding myself and thinking that there's no limits to this, that this can go beyond and beyond and beyond. And no matter how many books I read, there was always going to be another book that could stimulate another idea within me. So it started with books, and it started with reading. and then it came down to psychedelics.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask about that because, I just had a Carrie Hummingbird on here a couple shows ago, who's a shaman.
Yeah.
And she goes to Peru and the Amazon basin and has done ayahuasca ceremonies and I guess mushrooms and all that. How did you come upon the healing effects of plant medicine and hallucinogens?
So originally, my older brother he's basically been in a kind of environment where they take a lot of LSD, they take a lot of mushrooms, and I was kind of always the sporty one. I was kind of always the bodybuilder, and to me, that kind of seemed like all the hippie kind of stuff. I thought it was all the weird people that do that. Do you know what I mean? The idea that I had of myself, that was completely opposite to who I thought I would ever be. And then when I was really in a place of suffering and my brother started to explain to me what he's experienced on mushrooms, then I knew it's almost like an intuition. There was something telling me that like I have to do this. So the first time I ever done them, I got my brother to get hold of 5 grams. And I just sat in my bedroom on my own, took the 5 grams, and had essentially the most insane self-awareness experience I've ever come across that I could even begin to describe.
Well, that's interesting to me because my understanding was and it may not be true, obviously, for everybody, that for plant medicines and psychedelics to be truly effective, it should be done in a ceremonial type of situation, and yet you just sat there. Maybe you were just ready for that.
That's the only way I could really describe it. Is if you listen to, like, say, Sadhguru, you listen to Ram Dass, you hear the Ram Dass. If you listen to them, they talk about karma, and everybody's different and everybody's ready to pop at a different time. And clearly for me, this path was just something that I had no choice but to go to take part in. My mind could have resisted the journey, but essentially the self was just pulling me back to myself, and my mind had no choice in the matter. I could have resisted it all I wanted to, but I would have regardless eventually ended up at this point because I had no part to play in the real awakening journey that I've gone through.
So when you did the mushroom, and I don't know if you've done anything else, what exactly happens to the mind?
Ooh. The only way I could describe what really takes place would be an absolute dissolution of individual identity. So who you believe yourself to be is, you could almost say, it melts. If you could think about your mind melting, then the only way I could describe it is the idea of who you think you are melts into complete and absolute awareness. So my individual identity as James and the person I believe myself to be was just no longer there. Like, the only thing that I really was an absolute presence beyond eternity, beyond concepts, beyond ideas. Like, the idea of good and bad no longer existed. The idea of all opposing states of consciousness didn't exist. I was just eternal awareness forever and ever and ever. And there is nothing that I could ever do to remove myself from that place. It was, no matter how much the mind thinks I'm going to go on a journey and become this and become that, no matter what, I will always, forever and ever, end up in this exact place, no matter how hard I try. I had no choice in the matter to be who I am.
Mm-hmm. And see, now what you just described, I don't know if you've read about or heard NDEs, near-death experiences. Most NDEers describe similar to what you just said. So when you did these plant medicine journeys, you basically experienced what they did, but without being near death.
Yeah.
But that is what they describe. You lose separation from anything, and you join into the eternal oneness of all that is. And we read that in every spiritual treatise ever written. I'm a big student of A Course in Miracles, and that's one of the main teachings, is that once you return home to all that is, there is no separation.
No, I could 100% say that separation is an illusion, and it's the mind that creates separation, because the mind operates in opposites. The mind operates in good and bad, up and down. The mind wants to say that I am somebody and that is somebody else. The mind will never can never unify itself, because the mind can only operate in polarity. So it's only beyond the mind that we can actually experience unity.
Yeah, that's actually well put. Yeah, when here within this 3D world, when your mind is dwelling there, yeah, it's only operate in polarity. Absolutely, yeah. That's in spirituality we call that dualistic, and in true spiritual teaching we call it non-dualistic, because there's nothing else. It's just all that is. Wow, this is really great. This is really interesting what you're doing. I just want to go back for a moment to meditation. You were talking about that. My understanding of meditation is you don't have to sit and meditate for an hour or 3 hours, that you can be just as effective within 5 minutes of it. And my viewers and listeners are probably sick of me hearing me say this, but as a runner for all these years, running is truly my meditative time of day. I don't wear earbuds, and I just focus. I do affirmations and just focusing on everything around me, and literally it's my daily dose of meditation in that way, and it works for me.
Yeah, exactly that. It's the same. You could say it's the same for me. I play a lot of football, which you call soccer in America. And when I'm playing football, the only thing I could really say that I experience is just absolute an individual sense of direction just on the game. There is no idea of anything else. The only thing I'm really focused on is playing the game. All my problems, all of my ideas about reality, my work, money, all those things dissolve into the background whilst my attention is fully fixed on playing the game, which is a meditational experience.
Well, that is really what you're describing there. Many athletes understand that very well in the moment. There's a number of books written on what they call flow, which is exactly that. Dr. Csikszentmihalyi out of Claremont University in Los Angeles wrote the book Flow. Martin Seligman, he's at the University of Pennsylvania, and he's a big advocate of flow. But when LeBron James is driving down the lane to score, man, he doesn't see anything. Everything. I mean, how many athletes have reported everything slows down and they can't hear the crowds roaring? They don't hear anything, and that happens with you when you're playing football, and that happens for me when I'm running. Yeah, really, it's an alternative type of awareness, and I'm sure when that happens to like a regular athlete, they don't even think, oh, I just left, reality, Yeah.
But the thing is, it actually does make sense, because you are so focused on one thing, you aren't actually thinking. When you're doing something that you love and you enjoy, you aren't in a state of analytical thought. You're not in this kind of alpha brainwave state where you're analyzing your problems and you're trying to figure out where to go next in your life and what like who needs to do this and who needs to do that. You are just in a complete state of just one directional awareness that is enjoying itself. And because you're actually in a state of joy, you don't feel the need to escape that experience. Whereas I find with meditation, a lot of people are actually doing it to escape their suffering, and they're trying to forcefully escape suffering. And you cannot forcefully escape suffering, because that's, again, a state of resistance. You're not doing something that's joyful. So again, how many people are really switched on in terms of what direction are they trying to use meditation for, rather than actually this kind of thing, like, how do you word it? Just pure avoidance. It's almost a kind of avoiding my problems by trying to meditate, when really meditation is a sense of going into the problems and becoming aware of them, and just sitting as the witness of the issues and the darkness and the light, and just being that space in which all of those things exist, rather than trying to get away from anything, or trying to get to a good state of consciousness or avoid a bad state of consciousness. You are just then becoming the space in which all of it exists.
You know, it's interesting what you're saying. A lot of people who have never touched on this type of topic, most of them will say, what are you talking about? But all I can say is you got to try it. You've got, if you desire to seek more than what you're seeing and experiencing in this world, in this 3D world, you have to try it. But one last time, going back to your experience with psychedelics, I don't know, maybe this is not a good question, but what was one of the most vivid experiences you had when you were doing the plant medicine?
The one thing I will say is that I felt like I could see all past and all future combined into one moment. So there was no such thing as a future experience, and there was no such thing as a past experience. All of it existed in that direct experience, and I knew exactly what I was going to experience in my life, yet it did not matter. There was not a kind of an apprehension, even if it was a negative. Like right now, consciously, I can't really sit here and say I've seen my future. At the time in the experience, I knew my future, but it wasn't something that I was attached to. So it was a case of a knowingness, but not consciously. It was a very open state of knowingness that when I come back to my conscious awareness, it was only when I'd experienced that moment in my life, I'd have a deja vu experience. So I could be doing something and I have an instantaneous flip back to when I was inside that psychedelic experience, and I knew that I was going to experience it, but it was only when I actually experienced it that consciously I became aware of it. But before, if I tried to think about it consciously, I wouldn't have an idea. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen in 5 years' time from now, but within myself, if I was in a very deep transcendental experience through psychedelics, I would know what's going to happen, but it wouldn't be in a conscious manner.
Well, that's pretty cool description. You know, spiritual teachers have said for a long time, and now quantum physicists also say there is no time. No. You know, you have writings like A Course in Miracles they call it the holy instant, and then you have enlightened authors like Eckhart Tolle who are writing books called Power of Now, and really, if you really sit and consider the concept of time, it's just an illusion. You know, oh, where'd the past go? I don't see any. There's a future up. No, it's only right here now. You know.
Well, the past is only a memory. So we talk about the past, but the past is just memory. And what we call the future is what we try to create. So if we're imagining something bad and we believe ourselves to be somebody who experiences negative circumstances, we will portray negative circumstances to our idea of the future. If we believe somebody to be lucky and somebody who experiences amazing things and everything we want comes into us with ease, then we'll portray our future to be a joyful experience. So no matter what, but that's still happening now. You are still creating your future moment right here and right now by anticipating and believing that your life is a joyful experience or a negative experience, either or. So your future is then created the moment you walk into that state.
And well said. Most people, I believe, their thoughts dwell in the past, everything they've experienced. And by law, the law of attraction, and the more you dwell on thoughts of the past, would be a good or trauma or whatever, more of that has to be sent to you in your current life, in the
Exactly.
future. And people don't realize that. This is why you have to pay attention where your thoughts are dwelling. I'm one of my favorite lines from the course is that all thoughts produce form on some level. And boy, when you understand that, well, maybe I better be a little careful about what I'm thinking about.
I think there's the catch that people get when they first get into, say, the law of attraction. I'd say the law of attraction is one of the first things that people come across on a spiritual journey. And it's the moment they realize that thinking negative can draw more negative experience, they then become scared of thinking negative, and they get caught. Then they again get caught up into this idea that I have to make sure that I do not think negative because I don't want more negative things, which then creates more resistance to the negative and perpetuates and continues the cycle that you believe that you're trying to avoid. So it's always a catch. The paradox is always catching you all the time.
Well, and too, the way the law of attraction works, you can say words, but if your words of your desires don't match the prayer of your heart, the universe actually hears what's radiating from your heart. So if you're saying, I want to win $1 million. I want to win $1 million in the lottery, but your heart is saying, oh, you'll never do that. Nobody in our family's ever been rich, that type of thing. And that's all the universe says. So, just clear your mind of this and try to think as healthy and happy and loving and kind as you can. And then let it radiate from your heart. So,
but there's a teacher that I followed for quite a few years. I don't know if you've heard of him, Abraham Hicks. You heard of Abraham Hicks? And that they speak about desire being something that happens naturally, because every time you have a negative experience, the contrast of that experience creates the desire itself. So you don't actually play a role in creating your desires. So it's the same thing that if you have no money, you automatically desire more money. If you could say if you was put in prison, then you would desire to be free. If you're hungry, you desire food. No matter what, the contrast and experience that we go through on a day-to-day basis is all to make us desire more. There's no other reason for suffering but to make us desire the better and better and better experience. But of course, the better experience doesn't stop at a boundary or an attachment to an idea or something that we contain. Desire itself is a boundless experience that goes beyond and beyond material reality, because really what we desire is to experience ourselves in full and not just to attain something that's temporary. We're really seeking and desiring the full expression of ourselves, but we just tend to attach it to ideas like money and material success and all these things, and we don't really see desire for what it is, as the boundless sense of desire, which is wanting us to progress towards understanding our true nature.
Wow, man, I wish I had it figured out like you do when I was your age, man. This is great. I
don't have it all figured out. I still have my moments.
Well, you're way ahead of where I was at that age. So, but talking about you mentioned contrast. I'm a law of attraction life coach, and one of the processes I use, which when I was in life coaching school, we learned this from Abraham Hicks from the book Ask and It Is Given. It's called Clarity Through Contrast, where on one side of the page you write down 3 to 5 short sentences of what you don't like in your life right now, and on the other side of the page you write the 3 to 5 statements, the exact opposite of what you really do want. So what I'm getting at there is that contrast, if you understand, you can use it to gain clarity, and then you can leave those contrasts and problems behind. It's a beautiful process.
And I'd also say that I think a mistake people make when they're trying to manifest something is they're trying to flip their emotional state like way too quickly. So they are trying to jump from a negative to a positive when reality itself doesn't even function like that. So I think about it like, say, like an ice cube. For an ice cube to become steam, you have to add heat, and eventually the ice cube will melt, and then the ice cube will eventually start to boil and become water and boiling water, and then that boiling water will then become steam. So if we apply that process to changing our emotions, what we have to do is climb the vibrational scale. So we're going from, say, fear or anger to a state of kind of more just acceptance. So you're not, when you're just angry about something, it's more a case of, right, okay, I'm just going to surrender to being angry, and I'm just going to accept this situation for what it is. Just in that one single step, you have jumped from one frequency to another, and you've climbed the vibrational scale just through accepting that you are now angry, but you don't, and you're just going to accept the situation for what it is. You don't have to go from anger to joy. You just have to go from anger to acceptance. And that way, when you're in acceptance, you can then decide, right, now I've accepted this reality. What's the next best thought to acceptance? And it could be a case of like, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that this situation can now turn into this situation. And you're not trying to jump from hopeful to absolute bliss and joy. You're jumping from hope to an idea that I genuinely believe that this is going to work out for me. And then all you are doing is just gradually through every situation you're going through, you just gradually climb the vibrational scale rather than trying to skip from one stage to another.
What you're talking about is actually, again, in Abraham Hicks' book, given the scale of emotions. Yep. And I believe there's 24 steps. And it is so true. Absolutely. You have to take it a step at a time. Now, speaking of emotions, the other thing that I tell people is the stronger your emotions, combined with where you're at, mentally, is like pouring fire on I'm pouring gasoline on a fire, and the flame just shoots higher. So the stronger your emotions over something, then as Abraham Hicks calls it, rockets of desires are shot out to the universe. Yeah. Interesting.
It is. It's one of those things that I think people learn as they go along. It's not something you can take lightly straight away, because I think a lot of people are used to trying to get from feeling bad to feeling good in a really short period of time. So it's one of those things that you have to adjust to over time and accept that you cannot just jump from one state to the next. You have to really surrender to the process and be patient with yourself and allow yourself to feel your way, and just be okay with feeling acceptance for now. If you've been in a state of anger for, say, 5 months because somebody done something to you however long ago, and all you've been is just in this mad state of anger, you cannot change that momentum of anger to a state of joy in a period of a day. It has to be over a period of time, and you have to just allow yourself to release the anger so you can start and gain momentum in another direction. That's what Abraham Hicks talks about as well. If a car is going downhill, you can't just stop the car dead and then push it back uphill. You have to bring the car to a slow stop, and then eventually you can gradually turn the momentum around and get the car going in the other direction.
Yeah. Wow. This is just great. So, too, from my spiritual studies, I understand, and as you do well, that, the physical reality we all perceive in this 3D world is simply an illusion, which still most of the world can't wrap their mind around that, but it's true. How do you cope with this idea, and how can anybody in a body even cope with the idea, what, this is all an illusion?
But the thing is, the idea of it being an illusion is obviously fear, because their sense of identity is kind of forcefully being crushed when they feel like when they understand that it's an illusion. They've built up this years and years and years worth of memory and identification with who they think they are and their successes and everything they want themselves to be. And the moment they're told that, oh, this is an illusion, that it's the ego then that wants to grip. The ego wants to hold on to who it believes itself to be. So which is that, so it's more of a fear because they think it's a negative experience. They think that letting go of the mind and letting go of an individual identity is going to be a negative experience. It's not until we come to terms with the fact that bliss is who we are. It's not an identity, but bliss is our natural self. It's not until you come to terms with that that you can really accept the illusion for what it is, because you know what your true desire is to feel absolute boundless bliss. It's not to just get this temporary success and temporary money and temporary emotions. It's to get the full spectrum. You really truly desire the full spectrum of consciousness, not just the limited tiny vision of consciousness that you have as yourself. So it's more about the acceptance that the illusion isn't a negative experience. The illusion is actually a thing that teaches you and gives you the contrast to desire the full experience.
And I think that too, once you accept the understanding that everything you see and perceive, your life is an illusion, doesn't mean that you're going to just blip off the planet, and disappear. It means that you can go through your daily life, not taking offense from everything and just being a little more serene, smile a little bit more, and you don't have to go up to every person and say, hey, let me tell you how the world, and your life is an illusion. You can just go through life and you have this understanding. And believe me, in doing so, you would just help people as you go along.
You can still play the role, just not be attached to the role.
Right. Yeah.
That's all it is. The role can still be there, but you just understand it's not who you are.
Yeah.
And that way the role is actually more joyful and a better experience, because you're not attached to all the things that come with playing the role. Because nobody's attached when they fall asleep. The moment that the mind dissolves in sleep, and nobody's worried about the fact that the world's an illusion, because the world disappeared. The world no longer exists when you're fast asleep, and you're not worried about it in that state. You're not worried about death. You're not worried about your day-to-day problems. When you're in sleep, you're just in the completely unattached state, your natural state. But it's only when you wake up that the problems re-arise, and you start fearing the idea of illusion disappearing again.
I read recently that when you understand what you're talking about, that if you're going through your life, understanding that everything is an illusion and not real, but you are in a 3D body, they actually call that lucid dreaming, because you understand you're in a dream, but yet you're, like you said, you're playing your role as you go through life.
Yep. So have you ever had a lucid dream?
Well, I guess I am right now, right? So I'm lucid and aware I'm dreaming.
But I mean, is in the sense of when you're actually in a dream, becoming fully aware whilst in a dream during sleep.
I probably have, but I can't remember specifically.
Yeah, because even that will show you that, because obviously what a dream is just kind of unconscious thinking. It's your mind just playing out its own self. It's just playing off a scene, and you're more, you do feel like the witness when you're in a dream, because the mind and the unconscious is just playing out these scenes, and you have no control over it. But then the moment you realize you're in a dream, you will feel yourself literally zap into the experience and regain control over the dream experience. So I feel like that's something, when people have that kind of experience, it will also start their spiritual journey and enhance it, because they realize that they are not their body, because they can be fully conscious in two realms at the same time. They can be fully conscious in this 3D physical body, but they also can be fully conscious in a non-physical spiritual body during a dream, which then starts the question and process of like, which is my real body? If I'm fully aware of a body in the spiritual world, how can this be my body? It's just a question, just that little doubt in the mind of which one's real will kickstart another process.
Oh, wow. So, folks, we are in conversation with an amazing young man, James Miller from the UK. Transformed himself from debilitating anxiety into being an awesome spiritual teacher. But I do want to find out about this. I read all about and you have a website. It's called Frequency Hunter. How does that work, and why does it work?
So Frequency Hunter I wouldn't say it's a website, it's more of a landing page to a subscription-based program. And Frequency Hunter so I don't know if you ever heard of Neville Goddard either. Have you heard of Neville Goddard?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the teachings that I try to put in Frequency Hunter is all about coming into awareness of the frequency that you desire. And it also involves the process of meditation and understanding yourself combined with the teachings of Neville Goddard. So I've tried to combine everything I've learned over my years and not just kind of copy someone's ideas, but try and merge the metaphysical, the non-dualistic perception kind of ideas into a program that also allows people to consciously manifest what they desire without being attached to it. Because what I don't want to teach is people to become obsessed with their mind and think that their mind is the actual power that is manifesting and creating the reality. It's more about the surrender into the presence of your being and allowing that to be the forefront of where you know you're going, rather than being in this state of like, I need to be consistently thinking about where I want to go. So I do feel like people can become obsessed with thinking too much and trying to stay in the state rather than surrendering. And that's where I got confused for many years, where the law of attraction was everything. And I believed myself as the individual identity to be this powerful force that manifested everything. But the way you have to look at it is, like, for example, if I was to say to you, command your heart to stop beating right now, you couldn't do it. If I was to say to you, manifest a tear right now, and just use your mind to tell yourself to produce a tear, the tear wouldn't come out your eye. You have to feel the emotion, and the tear manifests on its own. The tear isn't something that sits inside of your eyeball waiting for you to feel an emotion, then it shows itself. The tear is literally a manifestation at the time of feeling an emotion. So all of these things that we believe ourselves to be the power of is really the power of the self. So we have to surrender to the idea that we are not in control at all with our minds, but it is the being behind that sits behind the mind that is in control of all things. And that surrender then allows us to like really go into the process consciously, and not this kind of attached way of, I need to be a master manifester.
I think the beautiful part of what you're saying is, here we have a man who healed a physical issue via his mind. And so I'm sure the people that you work with come to you, they're also needing some type of physical healing. And when you show them they can change the frequency of their mind, they will see some physical healing. I facilitate a Power of 8 healing group, which was started by Lynn McTaggart in American Living in London. And we see people come all the time, and they can't get past the fact they think the body is in charge, when in fact the mind is in charge, and they can actually heal themselves that way.
Yeah. Even Abraham Hicks talks about one moment of non-resistance can heal the body. The moment you allow yourself to be an absolute channel of pure consciousness, the frequency of your body will raise to such an extent that the healing will just happen naturally on its own. But you have to get out of the way. If you are in the way of your own healing, you will not heal. So if you're consistently thinking and overthinking the problems, you don't become a channel for that energy to pass through you. So the body is just a receiver. The body isn't actually doing anything but receiving the energy that you are allowing into it. So you could say, like, maybe like a light bulb. A light bulb only has a certain wattage, But if you increase the size of the light bulb and you increase the amount of electricity that can pass through that light bulb, then the more power and light comes through. So you essentially have to become just a bigger light bulb that allows more electricity to pass through itself. If you're only playing small and you're still holding on to the mind's programs, then you aren't allowing something bigger to come within you.
Yeah, we are powerful creators, and that is just so awesome. So, by the way, your Frequency Hunter program, I will put the link to that in the show notes so people can check you out and connect with you. I have a question about this because what are you, 28, 29 years old?
27.
27, and just already 27, your life experiences are phenomenal. Do you have possibly any books you might be writing about your experience and your teaching in the works? That would be awesome. I'd love to read it.
So I've got a plan to write a book called Return to Zero. That's in my plans, and that's essentially going to be just all about returning to self and the way to consciously work with every situation in your life so that you can start stepping beyond your attachments to any ideas and just gradually moving yourself into a state beyond the mind. Obviously, it's not something you can really, while sitting here, if I was to try and explain it, I'm only going to be pointing up signs to something that doesn't really exist, because it's more of a self-inquiry thing. It's more of going within yourself and inquiring, is the mind really real? And it's actually a simple process, and it's the most simple process, which is the most effective. So the more I would try and use words to say, return to your true self, you're never going to return to your true self, because it would sound almost complicated by trying to explain how to get there, if that makes sense.
Well, I want a copy of that, a signed copy of that book when it comes out. That'll be great.
No problem.
So other than your landing page for Frequency Hunter, is there a way people can connect with you directly?
Is in terms of like one-to-one kind of coaching?
Yep.
I have another program called it's called ZER. I pronounce it ZER, but it's actually ZER, Wellbeing and Manifestation Coaching. And that's ZER stands for Zero Effort Required. And that is about literally just one-to-one. It's sitting like me and you would now. We'd have a conversation, and say somebody would pick an area in their life where they really feel like they have a lot of resistance, and I was guide them through letting go of that resistance and allowing the frequency to build. But it would be, say, an hour long, and it's literally a case of I would talk them gradually into allowing that frequency to come up within themselves without having to force it, and I would do it one-to-one with them like we are now.
Very cool. So if they go to that page, there's maybe a contact form or an email?
They can pay for a one-to-one session. I actually do an introductory offer, which is 3 sessions for the price of 1. So when they first do it, so it's £111, which I wouldn't know how that would convert into into dollars, but it's 3 for the price of 1, so they can get 3-hour sessions for £111, which is probably around $130, I'd say.
Okay, excellent. So James Miller, it's been an absolute blast talking to you. You are amazing. When I was 27, I was just a stoner hippie, man. So
that was me when I was 17.
Oh God, well, you're on a quicker curve than I was. So but anyway, thank you so much for being on World Awakenings.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, it's been amazing.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified Law of Attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.